This is the story of Chad's January 2025 crisis, a pivotal moment in its turbulent history that might change the way we view the future of African politics. On January 8, 2025, Chad experienced a chilling attack on its presidential complex in the capital, N'Djamena. At first glance, this appeared to be the type of insurgent assault that the world had grown accustomed to hearing about in conflict zones. Gunmen stormed the complex, opening fire on government officials and soldiers, sparking a deadly firefight that claimed 19 lives. It was a moment that could have shattered the country's fragile political stability. The attack left the country reeling in shock, but what followed was even more profound than the violence itself: the country's response and the broader geopolitical shifts that this attack signaled. So, who is behind all this, and what now? Here, we would like to take a moment and thank you for supporting us and being a valued part of our strong community. And if you are not yet a member, we encourage you to join us and help build an even stronger community together. Let's get started. The morning of January 8, 2025, was one that will go down in Chad's history as a day of chaos and uncertainty. A group of armed assailants stormed the presidential complex in N'Djamena, the very symbol of the country's political power and authority. Shots rang out in the heart of the capital, and what followed was a brutal clash between the attackers and Chadian security forces. In a matter of hours, 19 people lay dead, and the entire country was left wondering how such an audacious assault could take place in the center of their government. At first, the assumption was that this was another attack by Boko Haram, the radical insurgent group known for its relentless violence in the region. Chad, having long been a frontline state in the fight against insurgent groups in the Sahel, had already become a prime target for these militants. Their presence in the region made it easy to draw that connection, especially given the scale of the violence. But as investigations unfolded, Chad's government quickly shifted the narrative. These weren't seasoned militants with a clear agenda, but a group of criminals, some of whom were reportedly intoxicated at the time. The government's statement that the attackers were misguided and drunk left many wondering. How could a group of intoxicated criminals manage to breach the most secure area in the country?
I don't find it credible that this was a terrorist act, as I was at the scene. However, the public prosecutor will provide clarification on the matter. In reality, they are a group of amateurs. They had no weapons of war. Their attempt was disorganized and completely incomprehensible.
This revelation forced the country to confront several uncomfortable truths. How fragile is Chad's security apparatus? If a poorly organized group of individuals could launch an attack of this magnitude, what does it say about the state of the government's control over its capital? This wasn't just a failed security operation, it was a wake-up call. It showed that Chad's political and military establishment was vulnerable to forces it hadn't fully anticipated. The fact that such an event could even happen in the heart of N'Djamena, one of the most fortified locations in the country, posed serious questions about the readiness of Chad's intelligence and defense forces. While the government scrambled to regain control of the situation, the rest of the world watched closely. The message was clear. Chad, a country with a reputation for being a bulwark against insurgency in the Sahel, was now grappling with instability from within. This breach of security revealed a broader challenge for Chad. Its security forces were not invincible, and its political system was under pressure like never before.
What happened was an attack by 25 assailants, 24 to be precise, a sort of group of bandits who arrived armed with machetes and knives. They descended violently, stabbing the 4 guards who were present. 1 guard was killed, 2 others were seriously injured, and 1 sustained a lesser injury, though his life is not in danger. After that, they managed to penetrate a short distance inside the presidency, and one of the guards began firing, alerting the other guards stationed nearby.
So, how did the government react to such a bold attack? Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. In the aftermath of the attack, Chad's government moved swiftly to restore order. Within hours, military forces poured into the streets of N'Djamena, with tanks rolling down the main thoroughfares as soldiers reinforced the capital's security. The government's message to the public was clear. The situation was under control, and Chad's leadership was taking the necessary steps to neutralize the threat. The government's quick action helped to contain the immediate danger, preventing the violence from spreading further. However, while the response was efficient, it also raised larger questions about Chad's reliance on military power to maintain stability. The government's decision to deploy the military to the streets was not just a response to the attack, it was a statement. It highlighted the central role that the military plays in maintaining Chad's political order. Given Chad's history of military rule and authoritarian governance, the use of force to secure the capital sent a clear signal that the military, and not civilian institutions, remained the primary tool for maintaining peace and order. Yet, this reliance on military power also signaled the fragility of Chad's political system. In a country where political transitions have been historically marked by coups and unrest, the ease with which military forces can take control reflects the country's lack of political maturity. The fact that military rule still dominates Chad's political landscape, even after the death of President Idriss Déby, suggests that the country is still deeply entrenched in the old ways of governance, where the military might trump democratic processes. This raises an important question. Can Chad ever transition to a truly democratic system, or will it always remain under the shadow of military rule? While the government's swift response helped restore order in the short term, the long-term implications for Chad's political future remain uncertain. Anyways, now let's talk about the elephant in the room. Why is Chad such a target for insurgent groups? This might help you judge who was behind the attack, if you don't believe the statement made by Chad officials. Chad's position in Central Africa places it squarely at the intersection of several regional conflicts, making it an attractive target for insurgent groups. The Lake Chad Basin, where the borders of Chad, Cameroon, Nigeria, and Niger meet, has long been a hotbed of violence and instability. For years, militant groups have used this porous region to operate across borders, launch attacks, and recruit new fighters. But Chad's active role in counterinsurgency efforts has made it a prime target for these groups. Groups target Chad not only because of its involvement in the fight against insurgency, but also because of its strategic military importance in the region. As a strong military force, Chad has been part of the Multinational Joint Task Force, MNJTF, established to combat Boko Haram and other insurgent organizations in the Sahel. This alliance has made Chad a direct enemy of these groups, and as a result, they have made it a priority to destabilize the country. Groups see Chad's military power as a threat to their ambitions in the region. For them, attacking Chad is not only a way to weaken one of the most capable forces in the fight against insurgency, but also a message to the rest of the region, that no country is safe from their reach. Additionally, by attacking Chad, these groups can create chaos in a nation that has traditionally been a stabilizing force in the Sahel, further complicating efforts to bring stability to the entire region. For the groups, destabilizing Chad serves to create a ripple effect, weakening other regional actors and securing their foothold in the region. Furthermore, Chad's geographic location makes it particularly vulnerable to attacks from insurgents operating from the Lake Chad Basin. The region is often described as a forgotten war zone, with numerous militant groups taking advantage of the vast, ungoverned spaces to carry out operations. The natural barriers that exist between Chad and its neighbors make it difficult for security forces to patrol the borders effectively. This makes it easier for groups to operate with impunity. Given these external pressures, how does Chad's internal political landscape contribute to its vulnerabilities? Chad's political landscape is complex and deeply rooted in its history of military rule. Since gaining independence from France in 1960, Chad has experienced numerous coups and political upheavals, often involving the military. After the death of President Idriss Déby in April 2021, his son, Mahamat Idriss Déby, assumed the presidency and established a military-led transitional government. While this transition was intended to bring stability, it has instead perpetuated the concentration of power within the hands of the military. Mahamat Déby's assumption of power was met with mixed reactions both domestically and internationally. On one hand, he has been hailed as a strong leader who is capable of maintaining order and continuing his father's policies. On the other hand, his leadership has been criticized as a continuation of the authoritarian regime that has ruled Chad for decades. The country's political system remains heavily militarized, with little room for opposition or democratic governance. The political situation in Chad is made even more complicated by the growing opposition to military rule. While Mohamed Deby has promised reforms, many in Chad view the current government as an extension of his father's autocratic rule. Protests against military rule have erupted sporadically, and the country's citizens are divided over whether the government is truly committed to democratic change or whether it will simply maintain the status quo. The January 2025 attack on the presidential complex serves as a stark reminder of the fragility of Chad's political system. With a military government that has struggled to gain legitimacy and a public that is increasingly disillusioned with authoritarian rule, Chad's political stability is in constant flux. The country remains at a crossroads, torn between the need for reform and the entrenched power of the military. As we look at the aftermath of the 2024 election, how did this event contribute to the political instability that led to the January attack? Chad's 2024 election was marred by allegations of fraud, low voter turnout, and accusations of manipulation, further deepening the political crisis in the country. The election, which was supposed to pave the way for a more democratic transition, instead exposed the deep flaws in Chad's political system. Many opposition leaders were excluded from the process, and the military's control over the electoral process cast a shadow over the legitimacy of the election results. As a result, the election's aftermath only heightened political tensions within the country. The low voter turnout and widespread accusations of fraud signaled widespread disillusionment with the political system. Many Chad citizens were not motivated to participate in the election because they believed it would not lead to meaningful change. The results of the election only seemed to reinforce the status quo, with Mohamed Deby securing power without a truly competitive process. This lack of political legitimacy contributed to a sense of frustration and anger among the populace, and the attack on the presidential complex was seen as a direct consequence of these political frustrations. Furthermore, the election results provided a pretext for further consolidation of military power in the hands of Mohamed Deby. The government used the results to justify its continued grip on power, positioning itself as the only entity capable of ensuring stability in Chad. This, however, only alienated opposition groups and led to calls for more radical action. The military's dominance in the country has made it nearly impossible for any political reform to take hold, and the absence of meaningful democratic processes leaves Chad vulnerable to both internal unrest and external intervention. As the country navigates its political challenges, the attack on January 8, 2025, served as a stark reminder that Chad's political system remains in flux. The failure of the electoral process to produce a legitimate outcome has only deepened the crisis of confidence in the government. So, what does this attack mean for Chad's future? The events of January 8, 2025, have set the stage for a new phase in Chad's history. The attack on the presidential complex, while a tragedy, has highlighted the vulnerabilities within the country's political and security systems. But it has also underscored the resilience of Chad's leadership and the country's determination to maintain control in the face of external and internal challenges. The swift response from the government and military demonstrated their ability to restore order quickly, but it also raised questions about the long-term sustainability of such heavy-handed tactics. The shifting dynamics of Chad's foreign relations, particularly its move away from France and toward new alliances with Russia and Hungary, signal a broader desire for greater autonomy. Chad is positioning itself as a more independent player in the international arena, seeking to chart its path and reduce its reliance on Western powers. This could open up new opportunities for economic growth, military cooperation, and political influence, as Chad seeks to strengthen its position in the Sahel region and beyond. However, the road ahead is not without challenges. Chad's political system remains deeply entrenched in military rule, and while the leadership may be seeking greater independence, the country still faces significant internal divisions and external threats. The shift in foreign relations could lead to new tensions, particularly with Western countries that have long had a stake in Chad's political and economic stability. Additionally, while diversifying its alliances is a positive step, it also means that Chad will need to carefully navigate the complex geopolitics of the 21st century, balancing its relationships with a variety of powers without alienating any one bloc. As Chad moves toward greater independence, The key question is whether it can sustain its stability in the face of these complex challenges. The country's ability to maintain internal peace and political cohesion will be critical to its long-term success. The January 2025 attack was a stark reminder of how fragile Chad's security can be, but it also served as a wake-up call for the government to strengthen its defenses, both internally and externally. The coming years will be a critical period for Chad, as it works to carve out its place in a rapidly changing world. So, whether the attackers were members of a larger insurgent group or just misguided criminals, the attack served as an important lesson for Chad. The fact that such a breach of security occurred, regardless of the attacker's intentions, exposes vulnerabilities in the country's security framework. It's a wake-up call for Chad's leadership to realize that security threats are not always as clear-cut as they seem. While insurgency is a persistent concern in the region, the very nature of the attack highlights a deeper issue within the country. Its internal security systems may not be as resilient as once thought. For Chad, the key takeaway from this event is not just about identifying the perpetrators, but about understanding the vulnerabilities that allowed such an attack to take place. Whether these were misguided criminals or insurgent operatives doesn't change the fact that Chad must be more prepared to handle a wide range of security threats, both external and internal. To become more resilient, Chad will need to fortify its security infrastructure, improve intelligence gathering, and create avenues for political engagement that allow its citizens to feel heard and valued. In the broader context, this attack serves as a warning not just for Chad, but for other African nations facing similar challenges. As the continent continues to deal with the fallout from historical political instability, economic struggles, and the pressures of global geopolitics, it is clear that resilience cannot simply be about military might. It must also be about fostering political stability, economic independence, and social cohesion. Chad's journey toward resilience is still in its early stages, but the lessons learned from this attack could serve as a guide for future generations. Chad has the opportunity to emerge stronger from this crisis, but only if it takes the necessary steps to address its vulnerabilities and build a more resilient, inclusive society. The country must not just focus on quelling immediate threats, but also on creating long-term stability that can withstand the pressures of both internal and external forces. Whether it was a random criminal act or a targeted attack by insurgents, the message is clear. Chad must prepare for a future where resilience is the key to its survival and success. Do you think Chad needs a permanent fix? What can be done? Should the locals be on the roads? Let us know in the comments section. What can make Chad secure forever? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.